Well, it was hailed as the best fight card of the year on paper going into Saturday night, and wouldn't you know it, UFC 211 delivered. It was a fun fight card, and we'll talk about it right here on the MMAfighting.com wrap-up show. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. It is very late here in the Big D, but we do have a few more minutes to talk to Mr. Shaun Al-Shatti about what transpired here at the American Airlines Center. And Shaun, let us start with the main event. Let's start with Stipe Miocic. He makes history. A lot of people didn't even know that this was actually a record within his grasp going into this one. He successfully defends his heavyweight title for the second time. That ties the record. But the big story, of course, is that once again, in the first round, he looks very impressive, finishes Junior Dos Santos. He knocks him out, and he's able to avenge that loss from 2.5 years ago. How impressed were you with his performance?
I mean, it's hard not to be impressed, right? Like what he's been able to do over the past couple of years is really quite remarkable. Four wins in a row. I mean, five wins in a row, but four first-round knockouts against legends of the sport. I mean, Verdum, Overeem, Arlovsky, and then tonight. It's really quite incredible, and in the way he's doing it too, almost making it look too easy. You know, we've always been looking for this guy who's going to be able to hold that heavyweight title for a long time. For a long time, we thought it was Kane, and maybe it is Stipe now. I mean, he's like you said, he's one away from breaking the record already, and who knows, he might be able to do it.
And so on Friday, I asked you, is he in that discussion for the greatest of all time? When you mentioned those names, it's pretty damn impressive. And after what he did tonight to JDS in a rematch, do you now feel comfortable putting him in that discussion?
I feel comfortable putting him in the discussion. I'm still not ready to quite go, you know, on that level.
That's fair.
Yeah. But if he does the next one, let's say the next one is Kane. Let's just throw it out there, and the next one's Kane, and he wins again in a very impressive fashion. I would have to really rethink that, because at that point, what he's been able to do, the sustained level of excellence, that's quite remarkable and relatively unprecedented in this division.
I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but I really think that if they go back to Cleveland, some way, somehow, for his next fight, it would do him so much good, because you can tell this week the personality is starting to come out a little more. He's a very funny guy. He's very personable. And if you put him there and he comes across like a superstar, not to say that Dallas didn't show up tonight. They showed him a lot of love. But I feel like that little extra Cleveland, you know, that love that they give him really goes a long way. So I hope that they get it done. But here's the interesting thing. At the press conference, he kept alluding to the fact that he needs to take some time to think things over, but he didn't quite elaborate. And to me, it felt like we were going back to where we were in January, where he said, they mistook my kindness for a weakness, that they took advantage of me, that I don't like my deal. It feels like right now he says, all right, I did it. I tied the record. I'm impressive. I'm knocking guys out in the first round. Let's talk again. Did you get that sense as well?
A little bit, and it's hard with him, right? Because he's so cryptic with everything, and as soon as, you know, he's willing to talk about sports and whatever, but as soon as you turn to, you know, that type of topic, shuts down instantly, and gets kind of defensive about it. So it is difficult to tell with him, but that was kind of the sense I got too.
Okay, so there isn't, in my opinion, a layup choice for his next fight, and let's assume that whatever's bothering him, he'll figure it out. He'll take his time, and he'll come back in relatively short order. To me, Kane would be the best fight, only because I want to see him fight, you know, the previously dominant champion. But Kane's back is a little messed up from what I hear, that he's not really going 100% in training. If it's not Kane, because I feel like we all agree Kane would make the most sense, who else is out there for him, in your opinion?
It's tough because, I mean, if you look at the schedule, obviously the fight that everyone jumps out to everyone is the Verdum versus Overeem fight.
Beat them both.
But he beat them both, and it was both so convincing, first-round knockouts. And that wasn't like a long time ago. Those were both relatively recent. I wouldn't be really interested in either of those rematches, to be honest. So you have to kind of look farther down the division. I mean, it's too early still for Francis Ngannou. I think I still need.
But he did talk smack tonight. Did you see that on Twitter? He said he wasn't all that impressed.
Yeah, I still feel like he needs one fight against kind of the elite of the division. You know, Derek Lewis is an option if he's able to get past Mark Hunt.
Would you be okay with that?
At this point, I might be if Kane's not an option. Kane, like you said, I would like Kane to be that fight. But if it's not Kane, maybe Derek Lewis if he's able to get past Mark Hunt. If not that, then I really don't know. I mean, you'd have to really kind of be searching for something at that point.
And so maybe the biggest question to come out of this fight isn't about Stipe Miocic. It's about Junior Dos Santos, because we talked about him on Friday as well. This is a guy who has not fought going into tonight in 13 months. And since that fight against Stipe Miocic, he's only fought twice and he was knocked out once. And as you mentioned, after that fight against Stipe Miocic back in December of 2014, the talk was like, how much more damage can this guy take? And here he gets knocked out in the first round. So are we back to that point? Are we back to, wondering if this 33-year-old can keep going and be, the fighter that he once was?
I mean, it's tough because you don't want to make knee-jerk reactions to things, but with the junior that we saw tonight did not. I mean, it was very short, and so it's hard to judge, but it didn't feel like the junior that we saw against Big Ben. It felt more like the junior we saw against Alistair Overeem, the guy who was kind of gun-shy, who wasn't really opening up, and he kept putting himself against the fence. And it's just like, at this point, anytime anything bad happens to him, it seems to be because he's putting himself against the fence, and he keeps doing it. And obviously, he got knocked out against the fence today. He's in a weird place, man, and heavyweight is a division of older men. And he's relatively young compared to a lot of the people at heavyweight, but his fight age is so much older than, like, I think his actual age, just because of, like we said, the Stipe fight and then those two Kane fights. He's in a very strange spot, to be honest.
Yeah, witness the fact that I believe he's actually younger than Stipe Miocic, and we don't view him like that, right?
Yeah, and you could even tell that this is something he's thought about because, I mean, you saw it tonight with the press conference when he was asked a very basic question of what's next, what would you like next? He got pretty emotional about it. Like, he was fighting back tears just thinking about that.
All right, let's talk about the co-main event now. Joanna Jedrzejczyk, she successfully defends her strawweight title for the 5th straight time. Yeah. And so that is, something that is notable, and she's creeping into that discussion. Best female fighter of all time, and maybe we could pump our brakes on that because, the females in the UFC is a relatively new endeavor, but she certainly has, an argument on her side of things. But let me ask you about the actual performance, because to me what is most impressive about Joanna is that every single time she fights, and she's gone the distance in her last few fights, she continues to get better as the fight goes on. Like, maybe a little slow to start, but then she really pours it on 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, and I thought tonight she did the exact same thing. Were you impressed?
Oh, how can you not be impressed? She said that she felt like this was her best performance in the UFC. I'm inclined to agree with her, man. Like you said, the way she's able to sort of gain momentum throughout the fight, and by the 4th round, it was just a masterclass. What she was doing was incredible. It was brilliant to watch. And I think the 4th round was actually when she got her 10-8 on one of the judges' scorecards. To just be able to pick up strength like that and figure somebody out in the cage. And Jessica didn't seem like she was able to make any adjustments at all. Like, she was so lost in there. And by the end of it, she looked so frustrated with anything. And also, Jessica was having success getting these takedowns, but then Joanna's defense, the takedown defense and the get-ups in particular, her get-ups from these takedowns, she was getting slammed to the ground and instantly popping back to her feet. What she was able to do was so impressive.
Yeah, I'd love to see how she looks at 125 and if she can be that dominant champion who fights at 115 and 125. It sounds like for now she's going to stick around at 115 and try to eventually break Ronda Rousey's record of 6 title defenses for women. And it seems to me like Rose Namajunas is the obvious choice only because she has defeated the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd ranked fighters at 115. And she has 2 wins over Claudia Gadelha, so I don't think that fight is going to happen anytime soon, even if she beats Carolina in Rio. Do you feel like Rose has any kind of chance against Joanna after what we saw tonight?
I don't envy her. I'll say that. It was interesting to me because, midway through this fight tonight, Claudia Gadelha tweeted out something that was, when you're fighting Joanna's like water. And it's just the Bruce Lee quote, and it's just to see her peers talk about her in such a way, somebody that she's beaten a couple times, it's really telling to me. I mean, I feel like she is so far above everybody else in this division at this point, other than maybe like a Claudia or something. I don't give Rose, I mean, you don't want to count anybody out, but if I was to pick that right now, I'd pick Joanna.
I wish Rose had a few more fights, to really get on a streak. She's only won 1 in a row. Yeah. She's coming off that loss to Carolina back in July, then rebounded with the Michelle win. And you kind of wish she had a little more time. She's relatively young in her career as well, but there really aren't a lot of options at 115. On the flip side, you look at Jessica Andrade. She was skunked, 50-45, 2 scorecards, 50-44 on another, and yet I kind of feel like her stock went up. she was gritty. She didn't give up. She kept going forward. Do you agree?
I agree. I mean, she put up a good fight, and like I was saying before, she's getting takedowns, and she was doing her thing. But the thing was, her thing was so figured out so quickly, and she wasn't able to make any adjustments. She's obviously a very tough fight for anybody in that division. I mean, she got hit with a lot of hard shots and volume, and just kept coming and kept coming. But it's for her to be able to come back against Joanna. I don't see how. You should have to make significant adjustments to her game, frankly.
Okay, a few other things we need to talk about. Let's talk about Demian Maia. He defeats Jorge Masvidal via split decision.
Yeah.
First things first, did you score it for Maia?
I did. I'm trying to remember. I think I gave him all 3 rounds.
Yeah. So did I.
Yeah.
So we're on the same page there. I thought it was a very impressive performance. I don't understand why people would boo that performance, but, we're over that sort of thing. I thought that's the kind of performance that he needed. Obviously, a submission in the first when it looked like he was en route to a submission would have been great, but it's obvious he's the #1 contender, 7 in a row against the best of the best. And I actually thought that this was one of his better performances. And again, like the strawweight title fight, I thought Masvidal's stock went up as well. One of those fights, once again, where both guys I thought looked really good coming out of it.
Agreed. And I mean, because Masvidal, I mean, he was doing a really good job of trying to fight off as much as he could.
Yeah, takedown defense was really good.
Yeah, and he was landing shots. Like, he probably did more. Not even probably. He did more damage than Demian did. But just, man, like death taxes and Demian Maia taking your back. Like, it's incredible what this guy is able to do on a consistent basis. Every round taking his back, all these creative back takes, and he's just an anaconda, man. Once he's there, you're not getting him off.
I hope they figure out a way to truly promote him. To me, he's Royce Gracie 2.0.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the exact same thing. And people gravitated towards Royce, and he could speak better English than Royce could back in 1993. So I don't understand why there's this sort of reluctance to promote him and push him. But thankfully, after the fight, he went on his knees. He asked Dana White, which is kind of a ludicrous thing that needs to be done. But Dana said, I'm giving you the title shot. And look, we've heard this before. It was kind of funny. He was sitting up there with Frankie Edgar, who's been told he's going to get a title shot, and that did not happen after knocking out Chad Mendes. But I feel like there's no one else at 170, right? So let's just assume he's going to get the title shot. This is a fight that I think is fascinating. Woodley versus Maia. It's a great styles matchup. Does Maia have what it takes to beat Woodley, in your opinion?
I don't know. I mean, I'm done counting him out. I feel like every time I've picked against him, he's won, and every time, it's been impressive. This is the fight I wanted at UFC 209. So I'm just frankly glad that we're finally getting it. Because, like you said, Maia is so far and away the deserving contender. He was before this, and to be able to stop Jorge Masvidal, not stop him, but stop kind of the streak that he was on in this fashion, he absolutely deserves it. And it's, like you said, it's a fascinating stylistic clash.
Speaking of stoppages, let's talk about Frankie Edgar and Yair Rodriguez. We thought this could have been a coming out party for El Pantera. Frankie Edgar had other plans. He had the answer to Yair Rodriguez's question. Yeah, he was fantastic in this fight. I mean, look, I said to a few of the guys in the back before the fight, it just doesn't feel like Frankie Edgar is ready to say goodbye. Like, he's not that guy that you're going to build off of just yet. He's still very much in his prime. He's, in my opinion, maybe the second or third best featherweight in the world, and he could probably do a lot of damage at 135 as well. This was vintage Frankie Edgar. It was a fantastic performance. The fight gets stopped in between the second and third round. The doctor stopped it after Yair's eye was totally messed up. First off, were you okay with the stoppage?
I mean, personally, I was okay, but also if I was Yair, I would be very upset. So I can kind of see both sides on that. Also, I haven't been able to see a replay because I was cage side, but I feel like they didn't use an end swell on his basically broken face after the end of the first round.
I think they may have. I saw Tate, the cornerman, working on his eye, and it seemed like he was using it, but we'll have to go back because both of us were watching it live. Anyhow, proceed.
Yeah, but man, what can you say about Frankie Edgar, man? He is not a guy who can be counted out yet. He beat him from a pillar to post in such a dominant fashion. It wasn't even close, and he's kind of in a tough spot now. He really is. If you're him, you're really just hoping for Max Holloway to win next month, because then you're right there. I mean, Frankie versus Holloway, that's a great fight. He's obviously the second best or third best guy in this division. But after that, I mean, if Jose Aldo wins, what do you do with Frankie Edgar at this point?
Then I think you have to go down to 135.
But he doesn't seem to want to go down to 135. He always maintains that he has unfinished business at 145.
I just think it might be a tough sell to do him versus Aldo 3 when Aldo has beaten him twice rather convincingly.
I agree with you, and that's kind of the spot that he finds himself in.
Yeah. So he wins the fight, and when this fight was announced, let's be honest, a lot of us were like, whoa, Yair versus Frankie. Remember yesterday we were talking about the jump from BJ Penn to Frankie Edgar. In hindsight, was this a mistake, or is this one of those, like we were saying, maybe a win-win for Yair? If you win, fantastic. And if you lose, look, it's not that big of a deal. You're hanging with Frankie Edgar, and there's no shame in losing to him. How should he view this loss?
I mean, he wasn't hanging with him.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
He was outclassed?
Badly.
Okay.
Badly outclassed. And if you're asking if it was a mistake, if it was a mistake for Yair, I would say yes. I mean, obviously this was too much too soon. But you don't know that until until it plays out. If you looked at all his past performances, especially the one against BJ, which at this point, how much stock can you put in that?
Right.
He looked like a guy who was the next superstar in this division. So I liked it when it was booked. In retrospect, it's easy to crap on it, but I mean, it is what it is at this point.
Did the UFC make a mistake?
I personally, I think so, kind of.
Too much too soon?
Too much too soon. But again, if he would have won, we definitely wouldn't have been having this conversation. We would have said, oh, look at this next guy in this division that's, Latin America, he'll be able to carry that market. So, again, it's hard to say in retrospect.
Okay, so I'm dying to get your thoughts on the Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier fight because for the second pay-per-view in a row, a bit of controversy surrounding an illegal knee. This time, Alvarez lands 2 illegal knees here in Texas. They have not adopted the new rules, so all you need is one hand on the ground if your knee is on the ground as well in order for it to be illegal if the strike lands, and that was the case for Dustin Poirier. But referee Herb Dean, he decided that the strike wasn't intentional, so as a result, he ruled it a no contest. This has been hotly debated, controversial. Some think it should be a DQ. Eddie should have lost. What do you think should have been done?
I personally think it should have been a DQ. I don't feel strongly about it, and I wouldn't argue against the no contest. But the justification for the no contest is interesting to me, right? Because it's intent. It's all intent. He says that's an accidental knee, but when he says that, he doesn't mean that he didn't mean to throw the knee. He means that Eddie didn't mean to throw an illegal strike. And at that point, we're just predicting what's in Eddie's head, and we're getting into a weird gray zone. But just in general, the one thing that stood out to me for that fight, I mean, I do the Pros React column for our website, and if you look at the Pros React column for that fight, most of it were professional UFC fighters, all of whom were saying, I don't know the rule, more or less. There was people saying that's legal. There were people saying that's not legal. There were people saying they just didn't know what it was at all, and they didn't know the rule. And I think that's more telling than anything that we need to get this figured out. The idea that there's different rules in different states is so absurd at this point, and we've used this comparison before, like if you're in the NBA and you're playing in Texas, there's a 4-point shot, and in Phoenix there's a 3-point shot. Like this, none of this makes any sense at this point, and for this to be a traveling organization where every month or every week they're going to be somewhere else, and it could potentially be different rules than the last week. That's just ridiculous, and we need to get this figured out just as a whole, as a sport.
Yeah, there's a few glaring things here, in my opinion. That's definitely one of them. In the heat of the action, a fighter can't be asked to think, okay, is it legal here? Is it not? It has to be instinctual, and these are guys who are getting punched in the head, so who knows what's going on. So that's first things first. All these commissions need to get their egos in check, and they need to come together. Now, it is important to note that at the weigh-ins, they're all told what the rules are. They're told what's different about, say, Texas than New York, old rules, new rules. So they are told, and that's good to know. But then the other issue is, as you mentioned, it's so subjective, intentional, unintentional. How are you supposed to know? How is Herb Dean ultimately supposed to know if something is intentional or unintentional when dealing with another fighter? And to me, it kind of boils down to this. If Eddie Alvarez would have been, fighting either on the ground or in the clinch or whatever and threw a headbutt, which is illegal no matter what, that to me should be a DQ because there is no case in which that is legal.
Agreed.
That is a DQ. But in the heat of the moment where he's up against him and he doesn't know if the hand is on the ground, let's assume, if the hand isn't on the ground, that's a legal strike. Hand on the ground, illegal strike. So it seems to me like Herb Dean is giving the veteran the benefit of the doubt that he meant to throw a legal strike. It just so happened to be that Poirier was in an illegal pose, if you get what I'm saying. And so he's erring sort of on the side of caution there. And to me, I can't really hate on that. That doesn't really bother me.
I agree with you in that sense because I think that is what it is, where it's just like he's giving the veterans the benefit of the doubt. And I certainly am 100% fine with that. But it just comes back to the idea that all of this is so subjective and so varying. Like, it changes on such a different degree. And it really spoiled what was turning into an incredible fight, man. Like, Eddie was out of there. Dustin Poirier looked like he was on his way to an incredible victory, and then Eddie turned it around, and it was one of the rounds of the year, and then to have it end like that, it's just very disappointing.
And I also wanted to say this. I saw a lot of people say, well, an illegal strike is an illegal strike. You know, it was illegal, so it should be a DQ. This is not basketball. If someone travels, you travel. But in mixed martial arts, according to the rules, there is something called a no contest. There is something called intent unintentional. So he's just going by the rules. Now, if you disagree with the rules, if you want to try to rewrite them, that's good for you. Great. You know, fight that fight. But in this sport, there is something called a no contest. There is something, you know, that a referee can say is intentional or unintentional. So you can't just say, just because it was an illegal strike, it should be a DQ. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. That's not fair to Eddie Alvarez. It is gray, and it's subjective, and it probably should be addressed. But on, you know, March or May 13th, 2017, he does get that benefit of the doubt. Yeah. Do you want to see the rematch right away? It seemed like both of them were campaigning for it. Would you like to see that?
100%. I think that's the only option. I think that's what you have to do. Okay. Both fighters want it. I want it. I want that to be a 5-round fight. I think that's a main event somewhere. And we need to see some level of finality to that, because that was like I said, on its way to just being, it seemed like one of the wildest fights of the year.
Okay, so before we go, do you want to highlight any other performance? We had Dave Branch return to the UFC in, you know, somewhat of a lackluster affair. To be honest, it was vintage Dave Branch, and I give him a lot of credit. Backstage, he was very critical of his performance. He said he understood why fans complained. And let's not forget, this fight was supposed to be on the FX prelims, got bumped to the pay-per-view, so it's now held to a different standard because fans are now paying $60 to watch this fight. So fans were a little antsy during the fight, and he understands that he needs to push the pace and be a little more aggressive. We had Jason Knight with a great performance over Chaz Skelly. On and on it went. Any other performances that you want to? Chase Sherman with an amazing win. Let us know.
That was what I was about to say. The Sherman Couture fight was a really wild fight. I mean, Couture was really gutting that out, and he ended up getting $50,000 for it in a fight of night bonus in his UFC debut. He was in a rough spot, so that'll help him out a little bit. You got James Vick making a monstrous statement and then getting on the mic and really owning his mic time. That was fantastic. And then even backstage, he really continued with it. You got Courtney Casey getting the biggest win of her career against Jessica Aguilar, a person who just a couple of years ago was considered the best strawweight in the world by a lot of people. Altogether, the prelims were very good. Like, it was a very entertaining card, top to bottom, I thought.
So in the end, the fight that the fight card, I should say, that we all thought was the best of the year, again, certainly delivered. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I feel so.
It's nice when that happens.
Yeah, it's all fun.
A little bit of controversy, some knockouts, some great performances, some breakout performances. It had it all here in Dallas. We did lose 2 fights earlier in the week, but in the end, the 12-fight card, I thought, was very much worth our time, and certainly a memorable one. It seems like every time the UFC comes to Dallas, fun things happen. And Joanna Jedrzejczyk definitely likes it here. She won her strawweight title in this very arena back at UFC 185. She now successfully defends it for the 5th time, 1 away from tying Ronda Rousey's record. She does so tonight, 5th time, like I said, against Jessica Andrade. Very impressive. And, of course, once again, Stipe Miocic tying a record of his own, 2nd straight heavyweight title defense for the big man from Cleveland. He knocks out Junior Dos Santos in the very first round. We appreciate you sticking with our coverage all week long from here in Dallas, Texas. It has been a very fun week covering UFC 211 for you. We will be back on Monday for the MMA Hour, but for now, we shall say good morning or good night, depending on where you are, maybe even good afternoon. For Shaun Al-Shatti, I'm Ariel Helwani. For Casey, Esther, and the rest of our crew here, thank you so much. We'll see you on Monday.